Hey everyone, welcome to the Ceres Podcast. I'm Stelios, your host and the founder and director of Ceres. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome back Lee Sheldon from MMU, where they specialise in developing managers, particularly in the hospitality sector. This is Lee's second appearance on the Ceres Podcast. He previously joined us on episode 112, which was also packed with valuable insights. If you're not already familiar with MMU, I highly recommend going back and listening to that episode, but also jumping on their website and have a look at their incredible resources at masteringmultiunits.com. MMU isn't just another training company. They take a unique approach by supporting managers where it matters most, right on the front line. In the world of remote and multi-unit management, MMU understands that lasting performance improvements come from consistently applying better behaviours and high-impact activities. While traditional workshops play a role, MMU emphasises that real learning happens in the workplace, in the real-world situations managers face every day. They focus on embedding the skills and behaviours that managers need to succeed. Lee brings a wealth of experience from his years in frontline operations, having held both single and multi-unit management roles. His deep understanding of challenges faced by managers has shaped his belief that frontline delivers the bottom line. Lee's approach to effective multi-unit and remote management is informed by leading thinkers and operational experts. Before joining MMU, he was the Director of Learning at the Development at SSP Group, a global leader in food and beverage operations in travel locations. Lee now helps MMU's clients by challenging their thinking on multi-unit and remote management, focusing on key activities and behaviours that define world-class managers. Lee is also a passionate advocate of Franklin Covey development programs, having both participated and facilitated these transformative courses. He and MMU co-founder Daniel Mills are proud that MMU is a trusted Franklin Covey partner, sharing the belief that people are the ultimate competitive advantage and that everyone deserves a great manager to help them excel. In this conversation with Lee, he recommended that I read the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott, a must-read if you're serious about upgrading your managerial and leadership skills. I was hesitant at first because I was going to throw myself into a new book and then a new thought process. But actually, it's been really good. So if you're interested in some of the things that Lee's talking about or that I'm talking about or things that we've written about or Lee's written about, I definitely think you should get this book, Radical Candor. It is a bit of a deep dive, but it's just Kim talking about her experiences and how she plays them out today. So I think it's really important because more than ever, we need to be on top of our managerial skills. This episode is brought to you by Ceres Natural Gold Batter Mix, the ultimate secret to perfect fish and chips. Our blend of 2 premium British flours, unique raisin agents and a natural colour ensures that signature golden finish every time. At Ceres, we're completely committed to quality. Our batter mix contains no artificial colours, no artificial flavours, no preservatives. It's only the best that goes in because we believe that every bite should be exceptional. It's proudly made in the UK, made using British wheat from Essex, and it's packaged in sustainable, plastic-free materials, again, sourced in the UK. And, in our view, our batter mixes support the local economy and it helps reduce the local and environmental impact. To get yours, visit www.ceres.shop for free next day mainland UK delivery. We also ship to Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, British Isles and many European countries. And this batter is also available through numerous wholesalers within the UK. Just visit our website, click wholesalers and you'll see it at the top. I want to say a big congratulations to Martin Robinson, who won a pallet of natural batter mix worth £1,300 in last month's competition. Remember, to be in a chance with winning great prizes like this, you need to be on our mailing list. We keep competitions off social media to avoid those annoying scammers, so sign up to our mailing list and you could be our next big winner. And if it's not a competition, it would definitely be a great special offer. So you've got to be in it to win it. At Ceres, we're more than just about batter mix. We're here to support your business with top-notch products, insightful podcasts, and articles designed to supercharge your success. We'd love to hear what's exciting about you and what projects you are currently working on, so please get in touch with us wherever you want, social media, email, you name it. Follow Ceres on social media for the latest updates, and remember, sign up to our mailing list. And also, there's so much to do here. And also, don't forget our Ceres Podcast discussion group. We'd love to have your feedback on the episodes. Everyone's a bit shy. They still end up messaging me privately, but you never know. One day people won't be shy and they'll just comment there. All the links you need will be in the episode show notes. And now on to the episode with Lee. I hope you enjoy. Lee, welcome to the Ceres Podcast.
Hello, sir. I'm so pleased to be back twice. I guess something must have worked the first time.
No, definitely. And I think A, I really enjoyed the first episode, but I think B, I think more than ever, and I know it sounds boring. Anybody listening to this, they might think I'm overstating the case, but I think more than ever, great management skills are needed. I think that staff are being paid more. It costs more to invest in your food businesses. You don't want to lose customers. I think more than ever, good management is just at the top of the list. And I think it's often overlooked. Many times I see people invest or buy businesses and they've not really thought about, they've thought about their menu offering, they've thought about their equipment, but did they think about how they were going to deal with employees? And I think a lot of the time they don't. And I'm not. That's not a knock. It is just that sometimes it's the last thing on their mind. And so I thought, we needed to have you on again. Last time we spoke was in the thick of, I think maybe toward just that, not the thick of COVID actually, maybe just to the back end of COVID. I think it was episode 112. So I think it was just the back end of COVID. So things have clearly changed since then too. So yeah, Lee, tell us a little bit about you, MMU, and some of the customers that you're dealing with today.
Thank you, Stelios. So today we are coming up to our 10th anniversary as MMU, Mastering Multi-Units. And I know I told this story back on our first podcast, but I, many years ago, got promoted into a multi-site role, area manager, district manager job. And it was the classic, here's a list of your stores, here's the company car keys, here's your laptop. I think I got a mobile phone. I think it was just not that old that I didn't have that. Good luck, get on with it. And I always thought I was unlucky. And that seems a bit of a bad way, dropping them into a deep end kind of thing. And discovered actually that's kind of the norm, that when people get promoted into multi-site, that are often just dropped in it and hope that they're going to be successful because they were good GMs or they were good store managers or pub managers or whatever the job title is. They were good at that single site, therefore you'll be good at multi-site. That is not the case. And that gave me the idea. And for 10 years, we've been working with a real range of clients. Again, I said on our first podcast together, my very first two clients, one was a chain of coffee shops, one was a chain of crematoriums. And it was like, coffee to coffins. What do I know about crematoriums? Actually, it's about management. It's about leadership, as you were alluding to a moment ago. And whether the product is cremation business, or whether it is the service of guests in a restaurant, whether it is retail, fundamentals around people management, I don't think actually change. The principles remain the same. I think it's a fascinating point you raise about it feels like we need more focus on good management and leadership than ever. And yet we live in a world where there are more podcasts, more TED Talks, more management books, audio books, everything, TikTok videos on the topic of leadership. There's more content out there than ever before. And yet you look around and go, have we really got a strong army of leaders and managers out there? Not so much. And that's micro and a macro level when you look around the world. So it's never been more important, I think.
I guess in some ways we also have more, more cookbooks, yet people eat more takeaways, and we have more
Good point.
health podcasts and health videos on YouTube, and yet we're fatter than we've ever been, or at least definitely unhealthy. I know I am, and that's not a criticism. I think that I wonder if it's just the way we absorb information these days. Is it just that we think we're leaders and managers, and we want to be? We walk around in our personal brain thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm a leader, I'm an alpha," and actually, we've just not actually been trained for it. We've never, we've never put anything we've never put anything into practice.
So you made me think there about, there's a book that many of you, the listeners, might have heard of, The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. He was Stephen Covey's son. And he became kind of the thought leader of the topic of trust. And his latest book, which I think was earlier this year, was called Trust and Inspire. And his whole argument is we need to move away from a command and control kind of approach to management and leadership to one of trust and inspire. And one of the points he makes is that he now thinks we're in enlightened command and control. So we're very aware we shouldn't be doing it. And we're very conscious about not trying not to do it. But we actually almost subconsciously fall into a number of bad habits, which means I need to have greater levels of control. And I agree with him completely. Probably about 3 years ago, I became certified in something called situational leadership, which is all about adapting your leadership style to the situation. And I do think there's an element of, I've got my natural style, that's how it's worked for me, that's what I'm going to use. And even if people aren't intentionally, explicitly saying that, it's really easy just to go, well, that's my groove, I'll stick with that. And you should adapt to me, as opposed to me as the leader, manager, adapting to you. And I think it's not enough of the latter, too much of the former, to be frank.
I think one of the things I come across as, managing people, I think that I'm starting to believe, and I might be wrong, but I'd like to be enlightened by you actually, is that are the titles leader and manager misused? Because I feel like they're overused. I think lots of people want to be leaders. It almost sounds gimmicky, especially if I'm a leader of people. It almost sounds like, people are aggrandizing their role. But also I think the word manager, I think it's very easily given to people. I know someone that's called sales manager, but actually he doesn't manage anybody. He's just he's a salesperson. He's just not managing anybody. But they've called him that because obviously he probably wanted a pay rise and he's fought harder within the company, but he's still not a manager. He doesn't manage anybody. So are these titles just being given out maybe sometimes in lieu of a big pay rise? I don't know.
You know what? I think sometimes you're right. I think it is a way of giving someone a nice title, new badge, etc. And it is, to some degree, providing them with some reward and recognition, even because it's not really costing anything. I mean, I've always felt that management and leadership are separate, but equally there's a lot that cross over. And management is essentially all about task, it's about process, it's centered on the moment or the immediate future. Whereas leadership for me is much more people and future focused. You talk about culture, we talk about a culture of involvement and diversity and setting a direction for the business. I think things like that are seen as much more a leadership. It's inspiring. Role modeling tends to be more commonly associated, I think, with leadership, whereas I think a focus on process or task or systems is probably more associated with management. At MMU, we focus on multi-site managers, as kind of the name suggests. So it's that you are a manager of other managers. We use the phrase leader of managers, partly to get both in, but equally I genuinely believe that you have to have a mindset shift when you move from single to multi-site. I wish someone had helped me in the way that have helped other people over the years when I first made that transition, because it isn't just, well, I was running one site, now I'm running 10, I do exactly the same job just 10 times. If you have that mentality, I think you end up micromanaging or potentially micromanaging because you're trying to be the manager of 10 sites. No, you should be the leader of those managers, inspiring them, yes, providing some focus and direction sometimes, acting as a coach, not a cop, trying to help people develop them. Your fundamental role is to develop their capability to drive the business and to reduce their dependency on you, because otherwise they're always coming to you when they've got a problem or to come to you with the solutions. So I noticed that the word manager, you're right, is absolutely ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I've seen in retail, Apple's a good example, one that everyone will know. I think I'm correct in saying that an Apple store manager is called an Apple store leader. An area manager or district manager is called a district leader. So they actually do use that word. I had the privilege of presenting at the Wingstop, the fantastic chicken brand, which I'm sure many of our listeners will know. They had their Connect event literally 2 weeks ago. And my opening session was about this. What is the difference between being a good manager and a leader? How do you step up? And that phrase, and there's a great book, The 1 Minute Manager, you could call it The 1 Minute Leader. They are, I think, interchangeable to some degree, but there are absolutely activities and practices that are more associated with leadership and less with management, and vice versa. And I do think defining that in a role is important. For me, management is what you do. Leadership is who you are whilst you're doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think if these sort of titles start to be clarified, it just makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I was thinking about whilst doing this, even if it's a small business, and I know you deal with multi-units, but we're going to get there. But would you say that every person should have a clearly defined role within the business, regardless of the size of business?
I mean, 100%. I don't think it matters if you've got 2 or 3 sites, or even 1 site, or 500. It becomes perhaps more pressing when you've got 500 sites if you don't have that clarity, because we like to say the road to operational excellence is paved with discipline and consistency. They're absolutely true. They're not the sexiest things in the world, discipline and consistency. But if you don't codify, if you don't decide what excellence is, in this case, in your example, what is this job here to do, then people will interpret it for themselves. And they might interpret it correctly, but they might misinterpret it. And I think when people misinterpret it, they're not doing it deliberately to go, right, I know Stelios thinks this. I'm going to think something completely different just to annoy him. No one does that. We just think our interpretation is correct. And whether or not you give people very kind of hard and fast rules of the game and they know what they need to do, here's a framework you need to follow, or if it's more, here's an overlying framework, or guardrails, if you like. So it's not exactly a blank piece of paper. I'm putting a couple of guardrails in here, but within that space, you can do what you like. Or I'm actually going to be really specific about what you can and can't do and really drill down. Again, I mentioned situational leadership. That's that part of it. How much direction, how much infrastructure do I put in place for this person because they're new at it or they've never had the experience of doing it this way before? Or I can step back. I don't want to micromanage. Equally, I don't want to abandon them, but I can step back and take a more supportive role. I'm here to offer advice should you need it type thing. That's a decision that managers have to make. And I think the mistake we make is labeling everyone as, Stelios is really great. He doesn't need any help. And just assuming that on every part of your job, you might not need any help. And it might be you're brilliant at inventory. You're fantastic at stock management. That is an area of focus for you. You could present tomorrow. If I ask you to stand up at an area meeting and present best practices, no problem. If I ask you tomorrow to step up at the area meeting and present on nuclear physics, I'm going to guess you don't know a lot about nuclear physics. But you're the same person. You're not different. What's different is the topic. The subject is different. You know how to present, though. You can present about any topic. You know the basics. You've got some transferable knowledge and skill. But actually, the topic needs to be far more explicitly laid out. And I think that's where clarity on a job role gives people that sense of what is it I'm expected to do, what tasks, what practices, how am I supposed to behave? Sometimes that's referred to maybe as competencies. Competencies in a job description, I think are important no matter the size of the company. Yeah,
that makes complete sense. So tell us a little bit about some of the companies that you work with. Are they all in the food industry, or is it a bit of a mix?
I mean, I would certainly say our sweet spots, our love is always going to be food and beverage, hospitality. But we've worked with some absolutely amazing organisations outside of that. Last year, we had the opportunity of working with Biffa, waste disposal. Again, very different products and service, but again, similar challenges when you're depot managers. In that case, you're leading depot managers from afar. We've worked in the past with businesses such as Moneycorp, which is a financial institution, initially about foreign exchange, but much now coming at an international bank. Currently working with Noble Foods, which is a fantastic food manufacturer focused on eggs, poultry business and milling. And then equally, from the perspective of more traditional hospitality brands, I mentioned earlier, we've been delighted to have the opportunity to work with Wingstop this year. Also, a brand that many listeners won't know where the pancakes are. They've got 3 restaurants, if I remember rightly, in London, and absolutely fantastic leader, Patricia, as the founder, but 3 brands. Another one, Real Eating Company with Helena Hudson. I'm going to say 9 sites. I hope I've got that right. 9 sites working with her area manager. So we've worked with large and small. Traditionally, it's been hospitality, but yeah, we've worked with businesses outside of it.
What do you think all of those companies have in common before they get in touch with someone like you? What is it they want to achieve?
Good question. I mean, I think there's 2 things. On a very practical level, it is, I've got managers who have been promoted to whether a single site manager or a department manager or area manager, and they've not had any formal training on what it means to be a good manager. So that's a kind of real basic. Our mantra, our reason we exist is that we believe everyone deserves to have an outstanding manager. It's the 21st century. It should almost be a human right, Stelios, that you have a great manager. But it doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen by accident, I think. And I think it's too important to leave it to chance. So on a really practical level, it could be that. It could be more specific. So, for example, we want to improve the process by which our managers conduct visits to their sites. So we've got area managers, we'll call them that. There are lots of job titles, but let's just go with area managers. They're visiting 8, 9, a dozen sites a month, whatever it may be. We don't want it to be a audit box ticking exercise. Equally, we need to have some consistency, some structure. Otherwise, people are doing completely different things, and we might have 10 area managers all doing completely different things. So again, there needs to be a sweet spot. How do you help us to focus on the most important things? And I would argue in that case, it's about preparation, clearly. You don't just turn up. There is the actual facilitation of the visit. What's your role in this visit? What's your focus? And what's the follow-up? And we talk about those 3 elements. It's part of our operational disciplines model, which I know you want to come to, but it's one of the most important things. It's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? It's the critical piece where everything is being reviewed. But if you're not in a hospitality business, but as I say, you've still got managers in diverse locations, that might actually be the form of a one-to-one once every 4 or 6 weeks. And that's where those review meetings happen. They might be happening via Teams or Zoom rather than you physically going to a location. But I would say that's the most common thing. How do we give some training to people who have been recently promoted? How do we put some structure into key interactions such as a site visit or maybe the monthly business review? That's something else which we're very commonly focusing on.
See, at the moment, I would say the power balance between employer and employee, I think is probably leans towards the employee a little bit at the moment, if we're looking at things plainly. And I definitely think most employers would think that. That shouldn't be the only reason to have good management styles and techniques and strategies. But it's probably going to get, especially with this new government, they've promised to clamp down on lots of things. So, and again, that shouldn't be the only motivation, because I think there are lots more benefits, when you've got a good, happy team. But you can't overrule the fact that nobody wants to be sued. You just don't want to. So do you think having good communication, good structure could not eliminate, but reduce the chances of HR problems?
Yes, I mean, good people practices should mitigate further problems down the line. Whether that's setting people up for success with clarity about their role, as you talked about earlier on, giving people tools or training to enable them to perform correctly, having the right recognition schemes, whatever the elements of the people offer is, they're absolutely partly designed to avoid getting into that potential route where you're sitting in an industrial tribunal. But equally, it could be about how do we retain our top talent. So it's not just about avoiding employee relations issues. It could be about labour turnover and reducing turnover. Particularly in hospitality or retail, we talk a lot about, we call new hire turnover. So in the last 90 days, what percentage of your people have come and left? So within 90 days, they've started and they've left. What are we doing to these people that they join and leave in such a short period of time? And sometimes I know of organisations that have never tracked that before. When they look at it, they have a heart attack. And it's like, wow, what are we doing to these people? Better recruitment might be a simple case of we've never trained our managers to recruit. In hospitality, I'm sure many people will know an iteration of this. There's this phrase, 2 feet and a heartbeat. So, you've got 2 feet, you're breathing, you'll do. We'll take you on because you can do a Saturday late shift or whatever it might be. Very rarely is that the successful thing to do. We need to be more confident and more focused on who we recruit. But you do that, and then because no one's been trained, we then take that person on, and they've been given themselves, their induction into the role is either non-existent or they're straight into a busy Saturday night shift, serving guests, put on a cash register if it's a retail store, whatever it may be, and they go, whoa, this is not what I expected. I'm out of here. So yes, it can stop you having employee relations issues, but also it can help you keep great people. It can help you not recruit the wrong people. And ultimately, it's the right thing to do. And I like to say, if that was your son or your daughter or your brother or your sister or your mum or your dad and they were recruited, how would you want them to be treated?
Yeah.
And treat people in the same way as you would want your own loved ones and friends and family to be treated.
Absolutely. I recently wrote an article, or co-wrote with my team, about employee retention, and the article highlighted on the likes of Costco, who have excellent employee retention, and then IKEA, who recently struggled in the UK with retention. And IKEA changed a few things up. They paid a little bit more, which definitely helped. But what they did, is, especially with new staff, is that they were constantly shadowed by older, experienced staff, been there a bit longer, and they made all the roles clearer, their expectations were clearer, and again, a few more benefits, which help people want to stay. But they found that actually pay wasn't their biggest issue. It was the fact that people just felt like they were being worked hard, ground to the ground, and they just felt lost, I guess. And I guess having good techniques that you just mentioned, it might sound time-consuming, and it probably is, because you're constantly managing the situation and dealing with things. And it probably will cost more money initially, but it's probably going to cost less than losing good quality staff to someone else and then having to retrain them. Because there's no guarantee that the replacement's going to be as good as the person they've took over from, is there?
Yeah, there's two quick points. I want to go back to Wingstop that I mentioned, as I had the luxury of attending an event about 2 weeks ago. And firstly, their brand that is not struggling attracting applicants. They're getting a lot of people. They're a good brand. They're one of the Sunday Times top 100 companies to work for. That creates in itself an expectation of what you're going to get. And they're very focused on retention. But even there, they're saying we need to make sure we've got the applicants. We're not just having to take the first person who comes on. Let's make sure we select correctly. And even they were highlighting, and I won't obviously go into detail, but the figures, how much does it cost to recruit a team member? How much does it cost to recruit a shift leader or supervisor or manager? It's considerable when you add everything in, from adverts to interview time to new uniform, all of these things. It's considerable. So there is absolutely a financial benefit. But the second point I'd make is, I could be wrong that it's still the biggest, but one of the biggest pieces of research was done by a guy called Kenneth Kovacs, and it was around what is it, the sort of top motivators for employees. So he interviewed employees, he interviewed managers, and one of the big lessons was what the employees wanted was actually slightly different to what the managers thought they wanted. But top line, there was three things that employees said they wanted. It was, do you care for me? Do you show that you're interested in me? Are you fair to me? I mean, from getting fairness on shifts, allocation, or whatever it might be, opportunities for development, are you fair? And do you involve me? Am I engaged? You ask me for my views. Do you get my feedback? So are you fair to me? Do you care for me? And do you involve me? Those three things, that research, Stelios, was done in 1979. So it's nearly getting on for 50 years. I don't think anything's changed. I really do not. And I dispute that, yes, Gen Z, Alpha, there's many different things, particularly the tools that they're used to. They've grown up in a different landscape to certainly my age group. But I don't think they would say they're not interested in, are you fair to me? Do you care about me? And do you involve me? The order might come slightly different between generations, but I think these things are timeless. They're principles, which is what timeless are. So you're right. It's the right thing to do. It's what employees want. But go back to, what would you want? What do you want? Every one of us who's a manager is an employee as well. Someone else is our boss. What do we want from our bosses and from our company? Surely we should replicate that, cascade that down in the way that we approach it, the way we role model it. And that's back to leadership and management.
Why, in my research, and after chatting to you a couple of weeks ago, it occurred to me that the word feedback is a negative word, or maybe a scary word, an imposing word. Why do you think that's the case?
I completely agree it is. I think it's too often been associated with, Stelios, I want to give you some feedback. Your immediate reaction is probably going to be, this is not going to be, you're doing a really good job. I'm so pleased with the way you ran that meeting last week. You did X, Y, Z, which led to these results. It's not like that. There's a problem. Your performance isn't where it needs to be. The numbers aren't where it needs to be. So just the word, I think, too often is associated with that feedback's going to be critical. I think people see, and I've used the word very carefully today, feedback, positive or negative. I don't think feedback is positive or negative. It should be always constructive. So reinforcement, praise, I should be giving you specifics about the situation, specifics about the behavior you demonstrated and the impact that you had on me or customers or whatever it may be. I should be specific about those three things. It's a model that is very famous. We use SBI, situation, behavior, impact. If I'm giving someone feedback to say good job, I should do exactly the same thing. If I'm giving someone feedback to redirect or correct behavior or performance, exactly the same thing. What was the situation, the context? What behaviors did you demonstrate? Actually, you talked over Sam in the meeting. That led, the impact on Sam was that she felt her contribution wasn't valued and she stopped making suggestions, some of which would have been really good for the team to have heard. What are your thoughts on that? That model, SBI, you can use either. And I think too often it's used purely for what people use, use inverted commas, negative feedback. I've got bad news to tell you. The feedback sandwich, and there are other versions of that title, but means I've got to say, something positive, then the negative bit, and then something positive. Again, I wish we could move away from, in fact, let's move away from the language of negative and positive feedback. It just should be constructive. And maybe even don't use the word feedback. And that sounds like I'm perhaps spinning it. But, Stelios, can I share some observations with you? I'd like to share some suggestions with you. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I've not even used the word feedback, and now it's opening up the route for me to give you some feedback. But you don't actually have to use the word. Could I offer some suggestions? Could you give me some suggestions in terms of I'd like feedback from you? You and I spoke about a book, Radical Candor, by a lady called Kim Scott. And it's been a huge hit. She's just written a brand new one, Radical Respect, which I'm keen to read myself. But Radical Candor is at the heart of this. And there's two parts to that for her. It is challenge directly. So being really clear, really specific, again, as we said, about what the issue is. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't be vague. But care personally. Goes back to people want to know they're cared for. So show that I'm doing this out of a genuine desire because I want you to be better. And I love her quote, which is the purpose of praise is to help people to know what to do more of. The purpose of criticism is to help people to know what to do better. One isn't positive, one isn't negative. It's just saying, that's great, carry on, do more of it. This isn't what we need it to be, but I want you to do better and I want to help you to do better. That's the mindset. That's the starting point I think we should come to. So, stop using the word feedback might help, but equally use feedback in a way to give constructive praise and reinforcement, not just criticism. And in fact, I just remember one of Kim Scott's key points is, don't give it out until you can receive it. So ask for it. Ask for feedback yourself. And if you're asking as a manager for feedback regularly, Stelios, what's the one thing that I do in the last 6 weeks that's been really helpful for you? What's one thing that I've done that's really frustrated you, that made you pull your hair out? What is that one thing? Because that's feedback to me about things I'm doing well. Is there anything you'd like more direction from me on? Is there anything you'd like less direction from me on? That's their way of telling you, you're micromanaging me on this, but on this issue, actually, I'd like a bit more help, a bit more direction. Do we ever ask those questions as managers? Not as often as I think we should. And to be honest, if we do ask them, they're probably prompted by the company's annual appraisal or performance review process. I'm sorry, you can ask any one-to-one that one question. What am I doing that's really helpful? Is there anything I could do differently or stop doing that would help you to be even more effective? That's an easy question to ask. Listen to it, act upon it. And if you're not going to agree, tell them why. But if you are going to agree and you're going to change something, I think you're more likely to get more feedback in the future because they've seen you ask for it, not get defensive, and then reflect and respond accordingly. And you're more likely to get more.
Do you think one of the issues is that most managers of, whether it's normal employees or managers, so managers of managers or managers of employees, do you think half the problem is that they just wait for the yearly appraisal as opposed to having regular just touching base regularly. Let's have a coffee. Let's say, you're a manager of multiple coffee units, and you just say, I'm coming in on the 1st of every month and at this site, and we're going to have a coffee. And we're just going to talk through things. Again, no negative, no positive, and there's a routine. And this routine, it makes the staff feel at ease and the manager feel at ease. And they can just talk to each other about what's going on that's good or bad, or any processes that need looking at. Whereas if you just wait for a yearly appraisal, you see staff sometimes, they bottle up. They're a bit like, oh, I've got my yearly appraisal. I'm worried about going into this meeting. It clouds any sort of constructive conversation, doesn't it?
Oh, I completely agree. I've got nothing against the annual appraisal in its sense. It should be a summation of the last 10 or 12 months worth of one-to-ones. And it's a great opportunity. And remember, the word praise is in the word appraisal. And it's about a great opportunity for saying, good job, well done. Let's remember what you've achieved. Let's honour those achievements. But if all you do is a once or maybe twice a year appraisal process, I think it's probably to some degree paying it, what's the word I'm looking for? Lip service, that's what I'm trying to say, to the process and not really taking it seriously. Whereas what you should do, as you've said, I think monthly, I think it's a reasonable time frame. It might be, again, back to situational leadership, you're new, maybe we need every 2 weeks, maybe once a week, depending on the situation. I don't think one size fits all, but for most established people, once every 4 weeks, let's have a sit down. Let's have an opportunity. It's not a check up, it's a check-in. A status update is part of the conversation on your current goals, how you're performing against KPIs. That should be part of it. No one's saying it isn't, but that shouldn't be the end of it. And what are you doing from a development perspective? What support might you need from me, the company? What challenges are you facing? How are you feeling about things? There's a wide range of topics that I think should be covered on a regular basis as part of that. I do believe it is their one-to-one, not your one-to-one. So could there be a bit of prep in advance? Let me know, Stelios, what you would like. Well, let's say we're having our one-to-one on Friday. This week, by today, as we're recording on a Monday, I would say let me know at least 48 hours in advance any agenda items that you'd like to cover, so I know what your priorities are. Maybe your top 3, and I'll share anything that is a priority for me that hasn't already been covered in our agenda. You probably have a structure to a regular monthly one-to-one, which to some degree is your agenda, but there will be stuff that comes up that isn't part of the normal agenda that you might want to raise or I want to raise. But again, as Dr. Covey used to say, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So what do you want to get out of your one-to-one with me? And then I can add my points in. Same thing on a site visit. Classic thing, we don't visit buildings, we visit people. It's not a site visit, it's a people visit. What do you want to achieve out of the visit? So if I've got my boss coming in and I'm a manager of a restaurant, my area manager's coming in, I've got 5-6 hours of their time. How do I maximize that time so I get the best possible time with my line manager, rather than, oh God, my manager's coming in or coming to fill out an audit, check up on me and give us a score and then go out the door. That I'm not saying you wouldn't do any status checks or you wouldn't check on things. What you inspect, you have to expect, so you have to do some of that. But again, it should be just one part of the visit, not the overall part of the visit.
Yeah, no, definitely. It makes so much more sense. And again, you're going to get more out of people if they're not feeling that pressure, that intense scrutiny. If you turned up, we use it as a coffee shop as an example. If you turn up and all it is, you're just going for a checklist, and it can feel like a barrage of negativity. An audit. You mentioned when we were on the phone, a friend of mine's always said to me, he said, if you've got someone that feels like they're underperforming, he said that what you've got to figure out is it a can do, won't do, or is it a can't do, will do? And you said to me something similar to that, which is tough on the issue, soft on the person. And how do you keep that in your mind when you're dealing with people and you've got a million jobs? Like, what sort of tips can you give people? Like when, you've got, let's say you've got 12 sites that you're looking after, or even just one, because someone with one site to look after has probably got a million other jobs to do. How do you sort of not lose your rag and just say, you know what, I've got to cool off and deal and be tough on the issue and soft on the person? How can you keep that in your mind?
I think, again, a little phrase like that is memorable. What it really means, and it's radical candor, isn't it? It was years before that book came out, but it means being difficult, challenging, stretching about what the issue is, but never making it personal. So critiquing their performance, their behaviour, but never about them. It's not about their worth as a human being. That's absolutely not. Again, think about how your brother, sister, mother, you'd want them treated. I think we're human beings, so it's very easy to make assumptions. So I know the reason you haven't performed is X, Y, Z. I don't know that. It's just what I think might be the case. Fine, you're going to have those thoughts. We're human beings. Test them. Ask some questions. Is the reason you've not done this that you don't enjoy doing this? Am I correct? You're giving that person an opportunity to say, actually, no, you've misread the situation. That's not how I've done it. So challenge your assumptions would be number one for me. Number two, and again, I think we may have shared this on a previous podcast, so apologies if I'm repeating itself, but PCOM, P-C-O-M, a really simple way to kind of diagnose why someone isn't performance, the PCOM model. The P stands for purpose. They don't know why. Why are we doing this? What's the value? Why is it being done this way? What's the impact of getting it right? What's the impact of not getting it right? So just understanding the why behind the what. The C in PCOM is capability. That's, have they got the training? Have they got the ability to do that task? Often people bring the resource into that. So have they got the resources at hand? Might be time, might be equipment, money, whatever it is, budget. The O is opportunity. So have they had the opportunity to practice? Have they had the opportunity to put this into practice, to learn from it? I think that's a key one, but I'd also add in, have they had the opportunity to get feedback? Have I told them that they're doing it well? Or have I not said a word? No news is good news. They haven't heard anything for 6 weeks. And then suddenly I'm erupting, complaining about their performance. If they've had no feedback in the last 6 weeks, why shouldn't they think they're doing it well? Why is it suddenly a surprise to them? So have they had the opportunity to put it into action, but also have they had the opportunity to get feedback on how they're doing? And the last one in PCOM is the M, is motivation. And that is do I want to do this? Do I care? Now, if I'm honest, was like the manager that you mentioned your friend might be, I would have gone very quickly to the the C side of that model and the M. Can't do, won't do. She's got a bad attitude, or he can't do it, he's not capable. And what PCOM made me think of was, hang on a moment, how do I know that they understood the purpose? How do I know they've been told it? I think it's very easy to assume, well, someone else has told them, surely. The previous line manager would have done that, or they've worked somewhere else in a similar restaurant, or whatever it may be. They must know this by now. Well, how do I know that? Have I ever asked? Have I ever tested their understanding and my assumptions? And the best way to do that is ask someone, why do we have this policy? Why do you think this process is in place the way it is? See what they say back. If they repeat back to you the correct answer, you've probably answered the question of they know it, they understand it, and it's probably, possibly, a motivation issue. They don't want to do it. Or it's an opportunity. They know it, but they haven't had enough practice yet. They don't feel confident yet to do it. So they're still not performing. They're trying, but they're not there. Have I given them feedback? I had the conversation 4 weeks about this performance issue, haven't said anything for 4 weeks, now I want to explode. Well, is that their fault or my fault if I've not said anything, given them any feedback for 4 weeks? I think it's my fault as the manager. I need to take responsibility. So don't just jump to can't do, won't do. The skill wheel piece, if you like. Think about, do I know that they've understood the purpose? And if there's any question for me, so I ask that question, what's your understanding of the policy or the process? Why do we have it? If there's any question that their answer isn't correct, then that's my cue to go, right, let me now reiterate, or I need you to review this piece of training, or let's run this session with you, or whatever it might be. But I now stop any kind of performance management conversation in my head. And actually what goes on is I now need to revisit the purpose through training, through greater explanation. It's often a communication issue, purpose. Or if there's an opportunity, have they had sufficient time to put this into practice? Have I, as I say, given them feedback? And that, again, is my opportunity to pause and say, right, let's review this every 2 days, or every hour, or every shift, or whatever, again, is going to be appropriate. So you will make assumptions, you're human beings, challenge those assumptions, tough on the issue, soft on the person, treat the person with respect, but then use something like PCOM to help you, just to say, well, do I know it's motivation? Or can I absolutely say, hand on heart, purpose, yeah, tick. Capability, yeah, tick. And I've got evidence, I've got documentation, if you like, to support me on that view? And if the answer is no, then I think I go straight back to that and revisit whatever the issues are. And it's often a mixture, by the way. It's very rarely just capability or just purpose. It's often a mixture of two.
I guess in some ways you've got to get out your head that the other person's either being lazy or malicious or and again I'm going to use the word, let's just say stupid. You've got to get all these out of your head. You've got to go into it without thinking these things, quite because I think if that's the case, then already you've gone into it negatively, which they're going to read off you straight away. And if you're verbal as well, they're not going to probably like that, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a bit of a model boy today to leave all these models out there. But I learnt one years ago, see, do, get. How you see a problem affects how you behave and the results you get. So if I see you, Stelios, as lazy and trying to do the smallest amount of work possible, I'm going to micromanage you. The way in which I manage you is going to be very different than if I see you as a high performer, you know what you're doing, you've delivered great results. My approach to you will be different. And I think the results I get will be different as a result of my approach. So yeah, absolutely don't make those assumptions. But also I think let's be kind to ourselves. We do make mistakes without a shadow of a doubt. We're all human. But be, I suppose, humble enough to say I don't have all of the answers. And I think, apologies if I did say this on our first podcast, but I had a story many years ago when I was a young, naive manager, when I was convinced I was basically going to discipline and I wanted to fire this person. That was in my head. I knew I couldn't do it straight away. I'd have to go through HR and all that. But as far as I'm concerned, they were useless. They were poorly managing their stock. Their inventory was all over the place in their site. And we'd had conversations and he wasn't performing. So I sat them down, called them to my office. I felt I was the big I am. And for me, it was the can't do, won't do. That was the problem. And within a couple of minutes, this gentleman burst into tears and told me he was dyslexic. And this would have been, I'm going to say, early 90s. And I'm ashamed to say, I think our level of understanding of dyslexia and what we could do about it was far, far less developed than it is today. But I went into that meeting with a mental model that this guy needed to be got rid of. And my first feeling was, I'd be careful not to swear here, but my view of myself was, you are a bit of a, how can you think that? And now this person's just opened up to you. And he was saying, he's never told anyone this, his mother doesn't know, and all this stuff. He was incredibly embarrassed and very upset. And I got in there with that mindset of, I'm going to get you. And that mindset very quickly changed to, I'm going to help you. What can I do? I'm really sorry. I should never have made that assumption. And long story short, he turned out to be a superstar. And he actually became kind of a trainer for me on stock and inventory management and all of the systems we use. He became my go-to manager. So anyone who eventually joined our business would go and train with this guy to learn how to do it. Because I'd gone in with an assumption that I didn't want to test. Don't think that your biases and your assumptions are correct. You'll have them, test them, challenge them.
Sounds like you had a bit of a Stephen Covey paradigm shift.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was careful not to use the word paradigm, but yeah, 100%. It's the moment on the train. And whenever we teach the 7 habits as well, and whenever we do that piece, I share that story. And I tell you what, the amount of people who you see their faces, the recognition, the penny dropping, and share stories along. In fact, I've had several people saying the same thing to do with, not always dyslexia, it could be mental health issues, whatever it may be, but something that someone wouldn't necessarily have wanted to say out loud, suddenly they share it and you're thinking, oh God, how could I not have spotted that? How could I not have known? Again, 20, 30 years ago, we were not as alive to these issues as we are now, but you're right. Challenge those paradigms.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really helped me be a better manager is removing myself out of the situation and trying to sort of almost judge myself from the outside. And I always try to pretend that the conversations are being recorded, because then it makes you think about the words you say. And I think words are really important, especially when you're trying to, because I think, especially if someone's panicking anyway and you say the wrong word, I think it has like a much larger impact. It's like, so and then they think, oh my God, he said this. And if you don't finish on a good sort of ending, you don't want them to finish the shift and be like, well, now I'm leaving. And, he said something negative to me, because I think it plays on people's minds. I think when you choose to deal with an issue is also very important. And these paradigm shifts are important, because you do need to go into these these sort of meetings or these conversations, understanding that you don't know the whole story, because you don't.
Yeah. And again, I know I said it 15, 20 minutes ago, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Get it from their perspective first. Get their views, get their feedback, whatever the conversation is, the topic is, get their perspective on it. And you'll be amazed. And I might be mistaking this, but I think one of the Jeff Bezos models or famous things at Amazon is that the most senior person in the room in the meeting speaks last. And again, it's if I'm the big boss and I'm saying what should be done, and I come to you, what do you think? You're probably not going to give me an answer. You're probably going to give me an answer that chimes with what I've just said because the big boss has just said that. So again, involve people. Back to, do you care about me? Are you fair to me? Do you involve me? Involve people up front, then share your perspective. And there's nothing wrong with you disagreeing with them, but explain why. The why behind the what is really, really key. And there will be times, I think of performance management where I've dismissed people for not wearing uniform. And it's really basic, but that person would have had probably a verbal warning, they would have had a written warning, a final written warning, and here we are again doing a disciplinary. But it's not optional to not wear your uniform or a name badge or whatever it might be. And I was discussing this with my colleague earlier as we're preparing for a session. We're working with Pizza Express this week, which we're really looking forward to. And one of the topics we're talking about is this difference between what do we mean by non-negotiable? Because it's a word that's used so much. And I think most of the times what we're saying is non-negotiable is perfectly negotiable because there's no consequence. If you get it right, no one mentions it. If you get it wrong, it might get mentioned. If you steal, that's probably a non-negotiable. That's going to be a problem. But if someone delivers bad service, you'd hope someone would say something. Is that a non-negotiable? I'm not. If we don't do something about it, I don't think it is a non-negotiable. And I would urge managers to, again, you can choose the language you want, but I like best practice and good practice. But be clear, for me, best practice is we're going to do it. This is why we're going to do it. This is the value. This is the impact, the consequences of not doing it. But lay out your case, explain why we're all going to do this. This is not optional. Yeah. Then good practice is, here's a good idea. It's worked in this restaurant or this pub or this place. You could try it. Do you want to go? It's optional. Make it clear for people where there is no option, it's mandatory, and explain always why, but also give people the opportunity to take on board ideas if they want to, but make it clear that it is their option to do so. But when there isn't, make that clear too. As someone said to me recently, everyone has a voice, but not everyone has a vote. And there was sometimes I'll get your feedback on non-negotiables, very happy to make tweaks and changes, but not doing it is not an option. And I used to talk about, I hate the phrase upselling. We like to talk about uptelling. But this idea of uptelling to our guests, we do it because we want our guests to know about a great new product, a great new side dish, maybe a new wine, maybe a saving they can make with a promotion that they might not know about. We're here to guide them. We're here to help them. Yes, cha-ching, we hopefully will get some money out of that as well. But our motive is we want to give them the best possible experience going. Not to uptell is absolutely not optional. You have to uptell. How you do it, we don't want to be, I almost mentioned a certain brand there. We don't want to be that kind of, you will go large with every meal, just a robotic phrase that you say over and over. Personalize it, but make your own suggestions. Give the guest the benefit of your understanding because you know that menu almost certainly better than they do. And you can make recommendations quicker than they could find on any menu or menu board. Yeah. So use your knowledge. Be the guide for the guest. That's what is not, if you like, optional. How you do it, we're absolutely here to discuss and how we can help you. But saying, I don't like upselling, well, that's not optional. If you want to do this job, you need to do it. If you don't want to upsell, again, I like to call it uptell, but if you don't want to do that, then, quite frankly, maybe we need to transfer them to the competition because you ain't staying working for me.
And I guess at some point, if all these management techniques just don't work, that's a really good thought process that you're transferring them to the competition because you're trying everything. You're trying to be patient using all these techniques we're discussing, but sometimes it won't always work. We could hope that it breeds a better culture, but sometimes that one person, that singular person within a group of, let's say, 10, just can't take to what you're trying to do, your brand's vision. So you are better off separating ways, aren't you, to some degree?
Yeah. Well, our first operational discipline is clarity of expectations, but we almost got rid of the second word and just made it clarity because that's really what it's about, being clear at the start what my expectations are, but being clear on your performance, giving people transparency and clarity is kindness, as was it Brené Brown said? I can't remember now. I think it was. And it is understanding if I'm performing. Don't wait 6 months, or as you said earlier, a year to a performance appraisal to go, I'm sorry, John, you're not performing. What? Well, no one's told me that for the last 9 months. Give people that sense of understanding as you go. That's the opportunity part in the PCOM model. If you're not giving that person the feedback for 9 months, there is no way it's their fault. It's your fault as the manager.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, before we get on to that, you mentioned Jeff Bezos, and I've been listening to him recently and reading lots of articles about him. And another thing that he says is that if you're in a meeting, it's actually disrespectful to not tell the other person that they could be wrong about something. If a ceiling is 3 meters high, but you're all like, no, actually it's 2.3. He goes that you can't respect each other. We've got to stick to the truth. If we've tried and tested so that it doesn't work, explain it, politely, respectfully. And you can have respectful discourse, but the truth still remains the truth. And I think that's one of the things that probably people do shy away from, that they don't want to be truthful because they don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. And again, it goes back to that radical candor, doesn't it? You can't hide from the truth or the topic that needs to be taught. And I find that one of the things that we hear a lot of today in business is that most businesses have a brand. I'm branded, but actually are any of these thought processes, are they written down in an operational pamphlet? Usually a handbook just has your staff contract and a few legal things that you want people to stick to. But does it actually go into detail of, again, the clarity, the expectations of that business? And sometimes, and if they are in there, how often are they being retrained and discussed and spoken about? And I think that's the other thing. I deal with a lot of food businesses, and very rarely do I hear that people have had a training day, or whether it's a Sunday or a Saturday or an after work hour once a week. So when are these things actually being retrained to people, or trained in the first instance?
Yes, I mean, if it was only as easy as having a brand manual or a standard operations manual or whatever it might be called, you've written it down, there you go, job done. Alas, it's not as easy as that, because we haven't clarified people's understanding. Have they even read it? Just because they've read it doesn't mean they've understood it. Just because you've said it doesn't mean they've understood it. So we've got to clarify, and we've got to revisit it, often quite frequently. I'm a great believer, again, you'll remember previous conversations, Stelios, that pre-shift briefings are incredibly effective, particularly in hospitality, to remind the team members what our focuses are. We talk about them bringing focus, structure, and energy. They're 3 things that I think a good pre-shift should do. But it's a real opportunity to just remind me, Stelios, what are the ingredients for that new dish? What wine would you suggest is paired beautifully with the new sea bass that we've got? What would be a perfect partner if you were buying a cafe latte in the morning? John, what could you suggest? Oh, a freshly baked croissant. Great, that's a really good perfect partner. Just constantly do it, not in a test, not in a quiz. You've got 6 out of 10 today, or you're in trouble, but just regularly reinforcing key messages, key pieces of information. Again, I think the best managers do that, but it doesn't happen by accident. They do. Right, this week, we're going to focus on our perfect partners for breakfast. And we're going to identify 4 to 5 perfect partners that we could be offering with most of our main signature items, whether it be coffee in a coffee shop, whatever it might be. Let's discuss that. Then, how would you best describe a freshly baked croissant other than a croissant? Other than saying, would you want a croissant? What could you say that might be a little bit more enticing? Could you talk about how it's made? Could you talk about the ingredients? Could you describe, flaky pastry or whatever it is? You have that conversation to get people to think, well, how can I describe this in an enticing way, in a way that's going to engage with my customer? Don't just think it's written down, that it's done and dusted. Having said that, I do think you do need to have, not everything, but you do need to have processes and expectations and standards recorded so that there isn't I thought it was this standard. Oh, no, I thought it was that standard. There needs to be a clarity of what that standard is. But as we said, if only it was a creation of all you need is to write it down, if only.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your operations discipline model. We discussed it a little bit on the phone call. You told me that it's been completely rewritten, or at least rewritten. I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we probably, I'll say 10 years, probably about 2 years ago, I thought the operational disciplines model has stood its test of time, shall we say. And I don't think it wasn't a case of having to rewrite it, but there was certainly some emphasis that we wanted to, I suppose, shuffle up a little bit and just reprioritize a little bit. And one of the big things we did was the first discipline was actually called non-negotiables, and we changed this clarity that we've spoken about before. So explain or ensure the why behind the what is clear. Let's not make those assumptions. That can be demonstrated in a one-to-one by me saying to you, Stelios, just walk me through the actions that we've agreed in our call today. You've written down 5, I've written down 7. When do we want to discover that you've missed 2? Next week or right now? Surely it's better to find out now. So checking people's understanding of a policy or procedure, that's what that discipline is about. Then the monthly one-to-one, we like to call it the period review. And again, I think most operators, if they're listening to this call, would say, oh yeah, we do that. And I would hope they do. What was the sales like? What was the result against your budget or last year or both? Profitability, all of those key profit and loss details. But for me, the period review should be more than just what were the numbers and what was the variance. A good period review gets into what we call the 3 I's. So what was the incident that happened? For the sake of argument, let's say bad weather. Who'd ever think that? Bad weather happened. Okay, what was the impact of that? For 4 days, really torrential rain reduced our business in the evenings between 6 and 10 by at least 40%. And overall, we reckon that cost us £5,000. Making it up. Okay, the 3rd I is the really important one. What was the insight you took from that? So what was the incident, the rain? What was the impact? Impact on covers, percentage business, whatever. What was the insight you took from that? Now, sometimes it's, what I did was I decreased my staff, I rang them up on the day and we reduced headcount. That really worked. So I need to make sure we keep an eye on weather 24 hours in advance and adjust our rota. Or the opposite, really nice weather, we didn't have enough staff on and we need to get more people in. So I need to be more cognizant of looking at the weather forecast and getting that done. Or I did nothing. We just had loads of extra staff. My insight is, that's what I need to do next time, is check the weather forecast and think about, well, how did it affect the business last time we had bad weather? It might reflect, no guarantee, but it's likely to be repeated. Industrial action on the trains, again, another example. Anything that happened during the month, be specific about what happened, when it happened, what was the impact, and what did you learn from it? Incident, impact, insight is a really powerful way to get the manager to really reflect on what happened in their business over the last 4 weeks, what the key incidents were. Not everything, it's not war and peace, but the big key things that happened related to perhaps your most important KPIs and area of performance. Get them to talk about it. So that's one really important part of the period review. The second part we've already discussed is, well, from a people development perspective, John's got a goal on his personal development review. What are you doing in the next 30 days to help John to achieve that? Now, if it's a manager, it could be, let's use our stock take example. He's going to do a stock take with me as an exercise this month. He's going to watch me set up and do the prep. Then next month, he's going to run it and I'm going to watch him. Great. So in 2 months' time, we should be in a position where he's done 2 stock takes and hopefully he's feel confident enough to do a 3rd one when needed on its own. But a team member could be as simple as, actually, I feel really nervous when I'm walking with the tray and I'm holding it with both hands and the drinks are shaking. Okay, well, what training could we give you to get comfortable holding a tray with one hand? What's the best use of your hand to do that? How do you position the glasses so you feel more confident? It doesn't have to be anything major. It just has to be, they'll be better in 30 days' time because they've learned how to carry a tray. Or when they go back from delivery of the food items to the guest table, they don't walk back to the kitchen empty-handed. They look for an opportunity to take any used items back, or they're purposeful on every place that they walk. There's a reason they're walking there. It could be as simple as that. The third part of this is the proactive planning. So if you think about the period review is looking back, no one hopefully drives a car by looking through the rearview mirror the whole time. Proactive planning is that next 30, 60, 90 days, what do we want to happen? It's the goal setting bit. We've all heard of SMART objectives, I'm sure. But one of the things that we felt was, I've got nothing wrong with SMART, other than the fact I think most people know it, but knowing it and doing it are 2 completely different things. We put emphasis on the S and our version is slightly different. The S and the T is specific and trackable. And we say the specific and the trackable bit, that's what needs to be written down. When's it got to be done by? What's the measurement of success? What does good look like? How are you going to track it, etc.? That's the bit that should be crystal clear and written down. Then you should discuss how is it relevant to what we're trying to achieve as a business? What's the line of sight, if you like? How achievable, how attainable is this? You want to stretch people. A goal should be out of reach, but not out of sight. And the M in our version is not measure, because that's covered by S&T. The M is motivation. Why should I care? Why should I be interested? And we like to talk about going beyond smart. So once you've done the smart part, what's the going beyond bit? Well, that's our 60-30-10. 60 minutes a quarter to do the goal setting. Then 30 minutes a week, every week. What am I going to do this week that's going to get me a little bit closer to achieving those goals? One or two. The weekly big three, we like to call it. And then every day, same thing. What did I say I wanted to achieve this week? What's my big thing for today? My daily big three. If I did nothing else, I'd get those three things done in order to achieve my weekly goals. And the final discipline is the impact visit. When you're visiting your managers, your teams, how do you make sure you, as Jim Sullivan said, make a difference, not just an appearance? So it's all very well being there, having a nice cup of coffee and checking an audit result, which again, I'm not saying you don't have to do, but your job, as we said at the beginning of this podcast, is to develop their capability, build their confidence and their competence, and reduce their dependence on you. And I think there's a line of sight there between how much time, there's a correlation to how much time you spend with them and how much they develop. So they're the four operational disciplines. They're surrounded by what we call the operational lenses. And what's that? Developing a team, customer experience, the quality of the ops, and your financial performance. And whichever of those disciplines you're talking about, those four things should be in the forefront of your mind. So with team member growth, it could be about improving the ability of the team to serve customers, upselling more confidently. It could be about that. Or it could be helping them to understand how much waste costs you in your business. So you're trying to build their financial awareness. So every single discipline can be looked at through each of those four lenses. We call them the four lenses, but every company will talk about the growth of their team, the customer guest, the operational excellence, and the financial performance. And I know you're providing a link if anyone wants to download the detail of that model. It's in our operational disciplines piece, and you'd be more than welcome to get a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely will put a link to the download so people can jump onto your website and also find out more. So do you tend to ever work with smaller businesses, or is it sort of like medium onwards? And will you ever have a provision for smaller businesses, do you think?
So, yes, I suppose what's a small business in the sense of number of sites? So I don't think we've worked with anyone who's just got one site, although I'm working with someone with two, so almost that. Typically, I'd say 4 to 5 is when you first think you need a multi-site manager, whatever you might call that person, area manager, ops manager, as say, endless titles. I mentioned Where the Pancakes Are, a fantastic brand that we had the pleasure and privilege of working with this year. If memory serves, they have 3 sites. Another one we worked with this year had 9. Pizza Express obviously have hundreds that I've mentioned. Wingstop are opening every 5 minutes. In fact, probably in the time we've done this podcast, I've opened 2 more, which is awesome. So I think in terms of an individual offer, it's interesting you asked that because it's something we're developing behind the scenes at the moment. We want to have an online offer. So if you, Stelios, or I've had people contact me, for example, from Dubai saying, I want to be a multi-unit manager. How do I access your training? Well, up until now, that's not been possible because it's been something a company would organise. But if you're one person in Dubai who wants to improve your ability, either I am a multi-site manager, I want to get better, or my aspiration is to become an area manager. What will help me to get there? We want someone to better have an online offer that they can access. So that's coming later this year, which we're excited about doing because hopefully we'll be able to reach more people and help those individuals. Equally, a company might say, we've only got 4 people, but we'd like you to, could we get that online program, or could you do a hybrid version perhaps of online and in-house face-to-face of that? So the team, we've done that before as well.
So we're coming to the end of this thing, and I'm really grateful for all your time. And this is the second time I've had you on. I know you're really busy, but if someone out there is listening to this, we've mentioned a few books. We've mentioned Radical Candor, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You mentioned The Speed of Trust, Trust and Inspire. Anything else we've missed? What if people really want to sink themselves into something? What do you think they should really read?
So I've probably been amiss by not talking specifically about some multi-site management books. My mentor in many respects, Professor Chris Muller. His book, The New Leader of Managers, is, I think, a seminal book on the topic of multi-site leadership. I highly recommend that. The Jim Sullivan work, I think it was reprinted a couple of years ago, an updated version, which is Multi-Unit Leadership by Jim Sullivan. Very accessible book, really straightforward, easy to read, quite fun. Very much in the context of hospitality and retail, but I do think it applies elsewhere. The Long Distance Leader by Kevin Eikenberry. Great book, a couple of years ago again. I think that really does apply to anyone who is leading people from afar. It's not about hospitality. It could be any business of any description. They're 3 books that I'd highly recommend. And I absolutely should talk about Professor Chris Edgar in the UK, recently retired. His first book, Effective Multi-Unit Leadership. So it's quite similarly titled to Jim Sullivan's book. But that was a really in-depth and based on some fantastic and robust research that he did in the UK and Europe on multi-site management. Again, particularly in hospitality industries. So they're 4 books specifically around the topic of multi-site leadership. I would love it if people were to want some continued insights from MMU. Feel free to join our MMU LinkedIn group. I don't know if I'm able to provide you the link for that, just so you can click on it in the show notes. But again, we just do regular posts, regular downloads. There's no cost obviously involved in that. So hopefully there'll be some useful information there. Have I answered that question, Stelios?
Absolutely, you did.
Okay,
Do you think there's something out there like for the single operator? I know you specialise in MMU, which is multi-unit, but do you think there's anything out there? What book of these do you think would really help to someone who is not quite at multi-unit yet, but actually if they got sort of the basics right, it might launch them into that direction?
I'd say the Jim Sullivan book, Multi-Unit Leadership, Jim Sullivan's book. Again, even if you're not a multi-site leadership there in that job yet, there's lots in there that will get you thinking about what it means to be a good manager, because so much of that is transferable at a single site level. We work with a lot of unit and store and restaurant managers. It's just we tend to come at them via the general manager, via the DM or the area manager. So we tend to be brought in to work with that level, and then we work with their team, as opposed to just working with the GMs, although we have done that. I'm just trying, I mean, again, as a seminal book, we mentioned it earlier, The 1 Minute Manager. Probably is, I'm going to say it's the best-selling book. I could be mistaken there, but it must have sold many, many millions of copies. It's a really quick read. Big font, easy to read. I like books like that. And it talks about these 4 1-minute or 4 short conversations, setting people up for success, goal setting. The feedback conversations, one is around reinforcement, praise. One is around redirection. And the last one, I think, is referred to as the wrap-up. So it's almost a review. What did we learn from that? What worked? What didn't? We were talking about the 3 I's. What was the insight you took from it? And it's a simple book. It's told as a story, as a parable, about this guy interviewing the 1 minute manager that everyone tells him is a great manager. What is this manager doing? So really easy to read and very, very powerful. And many of these books, not all of them, but will be available as Kindle and also audiobooks, because I'm a big audiobook listener. I walk the dog, tend to listen to the book, and then if I like it, I buy a hard copy as well.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I'll probably have the physical book, the Kindle audio, and I'm just trying to figure out all the time which way, but I don't like carrying physical books around anymore because they're just heavy, aren't they? So, so the Kindle really does, it's not as tactile, but you can take it everywhere, can't you? But,
yes. Although I've kind of gone back to books actually, because we live in such a digital world that actually it's nice now to have things that are away from the laptop or the tablet or the screen. So yeah, I found myself gravitating a bit back to books, like reading in the evening. I'm reading books physically, but I love podcasts and I love audiobooks, as I've mentioned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Lee, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've loved having you on, and we'll be definitely sending people to your website. And anybody listening to this should just be, out of curiosity, sitting on the computer and having a quick read on the MMU website. You'd be crazy not to. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute privilege to be back on, and I hope you're well, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Take care, everybody.